Australia unleashed billions of larvae onto a mountain of trash, and what those tiny creatures did next left scientists in complete disbelief. Somewhere outside Melbourne, a shipping container packed with 12 million squirming larvae just ate through more waste in a single day than most Australian towns produce in a week, and the man who built it was laughed out of 3 separate investor meetings before anyone took him seriously. The information in this video was cross-checked using data from Sustainability Victoria, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the CSIRO, and public statements from the founders and engineers involved in the project. To understand why this container even exists, you have to understand what's happening underneath Melbourne. According to Sustainability Victoria, the state generates more than 13 million tons of waste every year, and roughly a third of that is organic material, food scraps, garden waste, spoiled produce, the kind of waste that, once buried, breaks down without oxygen and produces methane, a gas roughly 28 times more potent than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period. Melbourne's outer landfill sites are running out of approved capacity faster than new sites can be permitted. And under Victoria's circular economy policy, councils are now legally required to roll out food and garden waste collection to every household by 2027. That deadline created a problem nobody had fully solved. Where does all that separated food waste actually go once it's collected? That's the gap a mechanical engineer named Callum Reyes stumbled into in 2018. Reyes wasn't from agriculture or biotech. He'd spent nearly a decade designing conveyor systems for the mining industry before he was made redundant during a downturn. Scrolling through research papers out of boredom one night, he found a study on black soldier fly larvae processing organic waste in the Netherlands and became fixated on one number. A single larva can consume more than twice its own body weight in food scraps every day. He built his first prototype in a rented warehouse in Dandenong using a repurposed shipping container, secondhand climate control units, and roughly $40,000 of his own redundancy payout. Investors weren't impressed. Reyes has said publicly that he pitched the idea to 11 different funds and was rejected by all of them, several citing reputational risk in the pitch notes he later saw. What kept the idea alive wasn't Reyes convincing investors, and it was a waste contractor in Dandenong who agreed to send him truckloads of rejected produce from a nearby wholesale market for free, just to avoid landfill tipping fees. Within 18 months, that single container was processing close to 4 tons of food waste a week, and the company, which Reyes eventually named Larvex, had its first paying client, a supermarket distribution center that was drowning in unsellable fruit and vegetables. Here's how the system actually works. Truckloads of organic waste arrive and pass through a shredder that breaks everything into a coarse slurry, removing anything the larvae can't process, like plastic film or rubber bands. That slurry is pumped into growing trays stacked inside temperature-controlled containers, each holding several million 5-day-old larvae. Over a 10-day cycle, the larvae consume the material almost entirely, leaving behind 2 byproducts, a nutrient-dense residue called frass, which functions as an organic fertilizer, and the fully grown larvae themselves, which are harvested, dried, and processed into protein for animal feed. The reason this matters at scale comes down to emissions math. A 2021 life cycle assessment published in the Journal of Cleaner Production found that diverting food waste to insect processing rather than landfill can cut the associated greenhouse gas footprint by more than 90%, largely because the process avoids anaerobic decomposition altogether. For a state trying to hit binding 2030 waste diversion targets, that number is difficult to ignore. By 2023, Larvex had expanded to 3 sites across Victoria, including a facility built specifically to intercept waste before it reached the Callum landfill, one of the largest active sites in the state. According to figures released by the company, That single facility now processes more than 25 tons of organic waste daily, run largely by automated sensors monitoring temperature, humidity, and oxygen levels, since even small fluctuations can crash an entire batch. Reyes has been open that failure is common. He's described losing an entire month's larvae population in 2020 after a faulty humidity sensor let a container overheat, killing millions of larvae in under 48 hours. Not everyone was convinced this scales cleanly. A 2023 review in the journal Waste Management raised a real concern. Black soldier fly larvae can bioaccumulate heavy metals like cadmium and lead when raised on contaminated waste streams, which limits what can safely go into the animal feed supply chain. Larvex now screens incoming waste sources and restricts feed-grade output to verified clean streams, redirecting anything uncertain toward fertilizer production instead, which carries a lower risk threshold. Scientists studying the sector broadly agree this is manageable with proper sourcing, but caution that it isn't a detail companies can afford to skip. A similar pattern is playing out on the other side of the world. In France, the company InnovaFeed operates one of the largest insect farms on the planet, processing waste from a neighboring grain facility and producing tens of thousands of tons of protein annually. Different continent, different waste stream, same underlying idea. Instead of trucking organic waste to a hole in the ground, feed it to an insect that turns it into something usable within days. None of this means landfills are becoming obsolete. Larvex's total processing capacity, even across 3 sites, still represents a small fraction of Victoria's overall organic waste stream. What it represents instead is a shift in how waste management authorities are starting to think about the problem, not as something to bury and forget, but as a resource stream that, with the right infrastructure, doesn't have to become emissions at all.